He preached salvation to his flock, but behind closed doors, he was hiding a darkness no one suspected. When his mistress threatened to expose him, she disappeared, and her body would eventually be found buried under his watch. This is the true story of Pastor James Flanders, Fort Walton Beach, Florida, and Marie Carlson, the woman he loved and killed. Segment 1. The Disappearance. Fort Walton Beach, Florida. A quiet coastal city known for its turquoise waters, Sunday worship services, and tight-knit congregations. Nothing here seemed capable of harboring a sinister secret. Marie Carlson was 28, a mother, a devoted churchgoer, and, according to many, one of the kindest souls in her circle. She was also intimately involved with her pastor, James Flanders, though that relationship was kept hidden. On May 17, 2011, Marie failed to show up for a midweek Bible study. Friends texted. She didn't reply. Church leadership called her home. Nothing. By morning, concern escalated. This was not typical of Marie. She was the kind of person people depended on, and that absence felt wrong. A few hours later, Flanders convened a search party. He appeared at the front, hands clasped, urging calm. "We will find her in the Lord's timing," he told worshippers. Yet as night fell with no trace of Marie, doubts began to creep into hearts. Detectives opened a case labeled Missing Person. They interviewed her husband, her family, and church leadership. They canvassed local streets, parking lots, and wooded paths. But the trail was already cold. Yet what investigators didn't know was that hidden beneath layers of faith, power, and secrecy, pieces of Marie's final days were already set in motion. What they found next would shake the community. Evidence of a secret burner phone, cryptic voicemails, and a pastor whose calm face began to crack. Segment 2. Hidden communications. In the early investigation, detectives discovered Marie had been using a prepaid burner phone. It wasn't linked to her known contacts. Its SIM was unregistered. But in that ghost line lay a trove of clues. When forensic analysts decrypted the device, they found dozens of messages between Marie and Pastor Flanders. At first, they were spiritual in tone, verses about confession, forgiveness, loneliness. But over time, they grew more urgent, pleas for honesty, hints of fear, and references to rumors that must stop. One voicemail stood out. Marie's voice trembled. "You said God forgave you. But this isn't forgiveness. This is control. If you don't stop, I will tell your wife." It was dated just 4 hours before she disappeared. The same time, investigators pulled cell tower pings, metadata, and timestamp logs. They discovered that on May 17th, Flanders' phone had pinged towers near a secluded road off Highway 98. Around the same time Marie vanished, the pastor claimed he had been driving home from church duties, listening to sermons on tape, nothing more. But his alibi was unraveling. Friends of Marie say that in her final weeks, she had been increasingly anxious, pulling back from the church's social events, canceling plans with friends, and confiding that she felt watched. She told one confidant, "I think someone will make me disappear." Meanwhile, Flanders publicly maintained composure. In a Sunday sermon a week later, he prayed for Marie's safe return, called on the congregation to remain faithful, and asked for their prayers, not questions. Then came the break that shifted everything. A confession from Flanders, and the shocking discovery of Marie's body, buried in his own backyard. Segment 3. The pastor's confession and backyard grave. Less than 2 weeks after Marie disappeared, Pastor Flanders stunned the investigation with his own admission. Under pressure from interrogators, he confessed to strangling her in a church office after she demanded they end their relationship. He claimed it was not premeditated. It was a fit of rage. But what followed next defied all sense of remorse. Because while emergency crews searched swamps and woods, Flanders was directing the community, joining search parties, posting missing posters, all while burying the truth under his own swing. At dawn, under the glint of forensic lights, police uncovered Marie's body buried in Flanders' backyard. She was wrapped in a blanket, her remains partially concealed under his child's playset. Her death was ruled homicide by strangulation. No visible signs of trauma beyond neck compression. But it was the place, the audacity, that shook everyone. Asterisk in arrest reports, Flanders swore he had hidden the body to protect Marie's dignity, to spare her family more trauma. He insisted it was a moment of weakness, not a calculated murder, but investigators were unconvinced. Because they found something else, something Flanders couldn't explain away. A flash drive hidden in a buried cache within the yard. On it, 6 voice memos recorded by Marie over the preceding weeks. In those memos, threats she claimed he made her, pleas for help, confessions she made in fear that her life was at risk. One final recording echoed in courtrooms. "If I die, it was James Flanders. I don't want secrets buried with me." That drive became a linchpin in the prosecution's case, and a revelation to the congregation that the man they trusted had orchestrated a lie from the pulpit. As Flanders awaited trial, the community fractured, and more women began coming forward with disturbing claims of his manipulative power. Segment 4. The fractured congregation and new revelations. News spread like wildfire. The pastor who had led worship, baptized children, counseled hearts, now stood accused of murder. In Fort Walton Beach, the congregation split. Some rallied behind him, citing forgiveness and praying for his redemption. Others walked away in anger, betrayal, and grief. But as the legal wheels turned, new voices emerged. Women from Flanders's past came forward, each with stories eerily consistent. Emotional manipulation under the guise of spiritual guidance, pressure to conceal relationships, and threats if silence was not maintained. One former congregant claimed Flanders insisted that their intimacy was God's will. No one was to know. Another said when she threatened exposure, he admonished her, "God will punish your betrayal." And whispers began of another disappearance. A woman from Flanders's previous pastoral posting in Georgia, a volunteer named Cassandra Bell, who vanished in 2014. Her case had never been solved. Now detectives reopened it, with fresh eyes and motive. Meanwhile, prosecutors prepared their case. Marie's flash drive of voice memos, his own confession, digital and cell tower evidence, testimonies from newfound witnesses. Flanders's defense team tried to reframe. The murder was impulsive, not premeditated. Some claimed Marie had mental health issues. Others argued the flash drive was edited. But in the courtroom, one thing became clear. The walls of faith he built were crumbling from the inside. Asterisk by the time the trial date neared, the community that once believed in Flanders's purity had been forced to confront something far darker. A man who preached Christ while silencing truth. And as the trial opened, the nation would soon discover that Marie Carlson might not have been the only victim in his shadow. TOB continued. Part 2, Segment 5. The trial begins by 2015. After years of delays and motions, the trial of Pastor James Flanders finally began in Okaloosa County, Florida. Courtroom benches were packed. On one side, Marie Carlson's grieving family and friends, determined to see justice. On the other hand, loyal church members still convinced their pastor was a man of God caught in a tragic mistake. The prosecution wasted no time. They painted Flanders as a manipulative predator who used his pastoral role to groom, isolate, and control Marie. They argued that when she threatened to expose their affair and his hypocrisy, he silenced her forever. The defense countered with a softer portrait. They described Flanders as a loving father, a man who had made a grave mistake in a moment of emotional breakdown. His attorney claimed Marie's death was a tragic accident, not a cold-blooded murder. But the evidence, prosecutors insisted, told a very different story. Asterisk as the trial unfolded, the jury would be asked to decide, was this a crime of passion? Or was it the deliberate silencing of a woman who had become too dangerous to his secret life? The answer began to take shape when the jury heard Marie's own voice from beyond the grave. Segment 6. Marie speaks from the grave. In one of the most chilling moments of the trial, prosecutors played the recordings from Marie's hidden flash drive. Her voice, faint but steady, filled the courtroom. She described threats, manipulation, and the fear that she would be silenced. She pleaded for help, and in one recording, she made it unmistakable. "If I die, it was James Flanders." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Some jurors visibly flinched. Others took frantic notes. The defense tried to discredit the recordings, suggesting they were taken out of context, that Marie had been struggling emotionally and exaggerating. But the damage was already done. For Marie's family, it was a heartbreaking affirmation of what they had long suspected. For the jury, it was a haunting directive, the victim herself naming her killer, asterisk with the recordings echoing in their ears. Jurors now faced the testimony of investigators who had tracked Flanders's movements, his lies, and his backyard burial site. And if Marie's voice wasn't enough, the prosecution had something even stronger, Flanders's own confession, read aloud for the court to hear. Next, prosecutors introduced a transcript of Flanders's confession to detectives that he admitted to strangling Marie during an argument in the church office. He admitted to burying her body in his backyard under his daughter's playset. He admitted to leading search parties while knowing exactly where she lay. The defense urged the jury to consider context, that Flanders's confession was made under duress, that he had been pressured into words he didn't mean. But jurors also heard his calm explanations on tape, describing how he moved her body, why he chose his backyard, and how he justified it as protecting her dignity. Detectives testified that his story changed multiple times. First, he said Marie left town voluntarily. Then, he said she died by accident. Finally, he admitted he killed her in anger. Asterisk, it was clear. James Flanders wasn't just guilty of a moment of passion. He had lied, manipulated, and covered up his crime for weeks, even months. Now, it was the jury's turn to speak, and what they delivered would bring closure to some, but not peace to all. Segment 8. The verdict and sentencing. After days of testimony and hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. James Flanders was found guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Marie Carlson. When the verdict was read, Marie's family wept quietly in relief. Some of Flanders's supporters bowed their heads, praying through tears. In sentencing, the judge addressed the former pastor directly. You abused your position of trust. You silenced a woman who trusted you. And you left a community divided and grieving. The court has no choice but to hold you accountable. Flanders was sentenced to 15 years in prison, a sentence many considered far too light for the crime. Marie's family publicly expressed disappointment, saying, "We may never feel true justice, but at least the truth is out." The trial was over. The man who once stood at the pulpit now stood behind bars. But the story of James Flanders and Marie Carlson was far from finished, because the community he left behind still struggled with betrayal, unanswered questions, and the haunting possibility that there may have been more victims. To be continued. Part 3, Segment 9. The family's pain. For Marie Carlson's family, the verdict and sentencing were bittersweet. Her daughter, only a child when Marie was killed, grew up without a mother. Relatives said she often asked questions. Why did Pastor James hurt Mommy? Why didn't anyone stop him? Her parents, once devout churchgoers, admitted their faith was shaken. We trusted him, her father said. We sat in his pews. We prayed with him. We believed him. And all the while, he was hiding Marie under his backyard. They remembered Marie not as a victim, but as a woman full of laughter and love. A mother who sang lullabies, cooked family dinners, and dreamed of going back to school. The courtroom could deliver a sentence, but it could not bring her back. And for the family, healing felt like an impossible journey. Asterisk for them, justice felt incomplete. 15 years seemed like an insult to a life so brutally cut short. And yet, they resolved to keep her memory alive, not defined by the man who took it. But Marie's family wasn't the only one left broken. The church itself, once thriving under Flanders, was now facing a reckoning. Segment 10. The church in ruins. At Calvary Emerald Coast Church, where James Flanders once preached, the aftermath was devastating. Attendance plummeted. Some members left organized religion entirely, unable to reconcile their faith with the betrayal. Others split off, forming new congregations. The sanctuary itself became a symbol of division, one side arguing that forgiveness should extend to Flanders, the other condemning him as a wolf in shepherd's clothing. Former congregants described how Flanders's charisma had blinded them. He quoted scripture to justify everything, one woman said. When we doubted him, he said we were doubting God. Community leaders admitted they ignored red flags, his secrecy, his control over finances, his reluctance to let outside elders supervise him. Asterisk, the church never fully recovered. To many, it became a cautionary tale about blind faith, unchecked authority, and the danger of confusing charisma with character. And while the church fractured, whispers of more potential victims grew louder. Could Flanders have harmed others before Marie? Segment 11. Unanswered questions as investigators combed through Flanders's past. Questions emerged. In Georgia, the disappearance of Cassandra Bell, a church volunteer from his former posting, resurfaced. Though never proven, some investigators noted disturbing similarities. A young woman closely tied to the church, sudden vanishing, rumors of a secret relationship. Her case remains unsolved to this day. Other women, some anonymous, described Flanders as emotionally manipulative, pushing them into secrecy under spiritual pressure. While none of their stories led to additional charges, they painted a chilling portrait of a man who may have wielded his role as pastor like a weapon. And then there was the congregation itself. How many had looked the other way? How many had heard whispers and chosen silence? In the end, authorities could never prove a wider pattern of murder. But the possibility left a haunting question mark hanging over Flanders's legacy. And so, the story ends not with total justice, but with lessons written in grief, betrayal, and a community forever scarred. Segment 12. Legacy of a Betrayal. James Flanders is serving his 15-year sentence in a Florida prison. He will be eligible for release in the 2030s. Marie Carlson rests in the memory of her family, who continue to honor her life with annual vigils. Her daughter, now a teenager, is being raised with love and truth about her mother's strength and the tragedy of her loss. In Fort Walton Beach, the story of the pastor's deadly secret is still told, not as gossip, but as a warning. A reminder that evil can hide behind a smile, behind a pulpit, behind words of faith, and that when someone says they feel unsafe, when someone says they are being controlled, silenced, or threatened, those words must be heard, because Marie Carlson tried to warn the world. She recorded her fear. She named her killer. She begged not to be buried in silence. And though justice came late and imperfect, her voice still speaks. This was the pastor's deadly secret. He killed the woman he loved, and in doing so, destroyed everything he once claimed to stand for.